I still remember the feeling of lace against my skin. It was my mother's dress, hand-stitched with small pearls and worn only once, decades before. I had it altered slightly to fit me, but I kept every stitch she'd touched. I'd dreamt of that day since I was 16. The day I would walk down the aisle to marry Thomas. He was charming, steady, and kind, or so I thought. He'd been there when I lost my job. He'd held my hand through my mother's cancer. He'd kissed my tears and promised, "I'll never leave you." But on my wedding day, he did exactly that. And he left without a note. It was supposed to be a small ceremony, only 60 guests. Close friends, old neighbors, cousins from my side, and a few military buddies of his from college. Everyone had arrived early. They smiled at me, adjusted my veil, and whispered, "You're glowing." The pianist began playing softly. The florist lit the candles. My father had passed, so my brother was supposed to walk me down the aisle. But he was late too. I stood alone in the side room, staring at my reflection in the mirror. 35 minutes passed. Then an hour. Whispers began to stir among the pews. Someone came in and said, "The groom hasn't arrived yet." My heart sank. I smiled weakly, assuming traffic or nerves. But in my chest, something broke. At 2:17 p.m., the priest came in. He looked nervous. His hands trembled slightly. I could feel the pity in his voice before he spoke. "There's been no word from Thomas," he said softly. "We've tried calling. His best man hasn't heard from him either." That's when the truth crept in like smoke under a closed door. He wasn't coming. He had vanished. And here I was, dressed like a promise waiting to be kept, in a room full of silence and fading laughter. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there in the mirror, looking at the woman who believed she was worth staying for. One by one, people began to leave the church. Some hugged me. Some avoided my eyes. Some whispered cruel things, not realizing I could hear. Maybe she drove him away. Who just leaves like that? She's almost 40. Why would he marry her now? By 5 p.m., the pews were empty. Only the florist was left, collecting the flowers meant for a celebration. I sat on the altar steps in my gown, refusing to move, refusing to believe this was real. The candles had burned down to stubs. Outside, it started to rain. And I waited, hoping, praying, begging, until the janitor tapped me on the shoulder and gently said, "Ma'am, it's time to go." It felt humiliating, but I didn't want to waste it. The cake, a beautiful 3-tier vanilla cream with hand-piped roses, had been untouched. People were too uncomfortable to stay, let alone eat. So I asked the venue to box it up. I drove home in my wedding dress, veil crumpled in the passenger seat, cake in the back seat like a cruel joke. Neighbors watched me pull into the driveway. I could see their faces behind curtains. I imagined what they were whispering. "She's back already?" She must have been stood up. I brought the cake inside. Cut myself a slice. And then I cried into it. My brother arrived at my house later that night, drunk, eyes red, avoiding my gaze. He didn't walk me down the aisle that day, because he knew. "I didn't know how to tell you," he slurred. "Thomas told me he was leaving. He called me at 6 a.m. and said he wasn't man enough for this." I sat perfectly still. "You knew he was going to leave me there?" "I thought he'd change his mind. I thought he'd show." I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just looked at the man who was supposed to protect me and said, "Get out." And he did. Waking up the next day was the cruelest part. For a moment, as the sunlight streamed in, I forgot. Then I saw the dress crumpled in a pile on the floor. The half-eaten cake on the counter. My wedding shoes kicked beneath the table. And I remembered. There was no honeymoon. No husband beside me. No name change. Just silence. And the sound of my own breath, tight in my chest. I spent that day in bed, phone off, blinds drawn. I didn't want comfort. I wanted the world to stop spinning long enough for my heart to catch up. I wrote him letters. Each one different. One begged for answers. Another screamed at him in writing. One even tried to apologize, as if I'd done something wrong. But I never sent them. They stayed folded inside my diary, ink smudged by tears. I just needed to say the things that were poisoning me. I gave you everything, one letter read. I loved you through my lowest points. And you left me like I meant nothing. Some nights, I still pull those letters out and read them. To remind myself how much pain I survived. It took me 4 days. 4 days of hiding behind blackout curtains. Of not answering the door. Of watching the world move on without me. But eventually, I needed groceries. I pulled on a hoodie, sunglasses, and walked to the corner store with my head down. My hands trembled with every step. People looked at me. Some with pity. Some with that same judging curiosity people save for car wrecks and disasters. The cashier, an older woman named Linda, bagged my items slowly. Then whispered, "You didn't deserve what he did." And for the first time in days, I felt seen. By the end of that week, it hit the local gossip blogs. Runaway groom leaves bride waiting at altar. Photos of me in my wedding dress started circulating. One of them showed me standing at the church doors, confused and teary-eyed. The comments were brutal. "She looks desperate. Bet she scared him off. No man wants that kind of drama." They didn't know I had lost my mother the year before. That Thomas helped me through that grief. That he promised me forever when I was at my lowest. They didn't care. They just wanted a story. And I was their tragedy. I couldn't bring myself to put it away. The dress hung in the living room, still draped on its mannequin. I'd walk past it every day, avoiding its eyes, because yes, it felt like it had eyes. Eyes that watched, judged, mourned. I tried to throw it out once. Carried it to the curb. But something about it, about my mother's stitching, about the lace she touched with love, stopped me. So I brought it back in. Not as a symbol of him. But as a piece of her. A ghost I still wanted to hold on to. A few friends came over 2 weeks later, trying to cheer me up. They brought wine, takeout, and stories from their jobs. They laughed too loudly, maybe to fill the silence they feared from me. I tried. I really did. But when one of them casually joked, "Well, at least you didn't waste years on him," I dropped my fork. My hand shook. "For years," I said quietly. "For years I gave him. I took care of his dog. I cleaned his wounds when he came home drunk. I held his mother's hand when she died." No one spoke after that. Because what do you say to someone who lost something that wasn't even dead? It sounds small. But that night, after finishing a bottle of red wine and staring at his name in my phone for 20 silent minutes, I deleted his contact. No more temptation to call. No more false hope of a sudden explanation. My thumb hovered over the screen for longer than I care to admit. My heart screamed at me to leave a door open, just in case. But I tapped delete contact. And just like that, I took back one sliver of my power. It didn't erase the pain, but it told me I could survive one more night. I found an old journal while cleaning the hall closet. It was full of sweet letters I'd written to Thomas in the early years. Stuff like, "I love the way you make me feel safe. You're the first man who makes me want forever. If you ever leave, I'll break." That last line made me flinch. Because I had broken. But here I was. Still breathing. I ripped out page after page and fed them into the fireplace. The flames crackled like applause. I wasn't ready to move on. But I was ready to burn the lies I once believed. Her name was Donna. She had kind eyes and a soft, maternal voice. I sat stiffly in her office the first day, arms crossed like armor. "I was left on my wedding day," I blurted. Like a goddamn scene from a movie no one watches twice. She nodded gently. And what did that feel like? It felt like dying while everyone around me celebrated life. It felt like betrayal from the man I trusted most. But I didn't say any of that. I just whispered, "It felt like I disappeared." And she wrote something down before saying, "Let's work on making you visible again." 3 months passed before I saw him again. I was in the grocery store, picking up frozen spinach, when I turned the corner, and there he was. Thomas. He looked small. Shrunk. Older somehow. Like guilt had added 10 pounds to his shadow. We locked eyes. My throat went dry. I thought I might faint. But instead of crying, I stood up straighter. He started to walk toward me. But I turned around and walked the other way. I didn't run. I didn't hide. And when I reached my car, I cried, not from sadness, but because I realized I didn't need his words anymore. After that grocery store run-in, I expected something, a text, an email, a knock on the door. But nothing came. No "I'm sorry." No "I panicked." Just silence. It made me realize something ugly but liberating. He never felt I was worth an explanation. That kind of pain cuts deep, not because you were left, but because you weren't even given the dignity of closure. But I wasn't going to let him define the ending. If he wouldn't give me peace, I'd give it to myself, even if I had to stitch it together one tear at a time. It happened on a Sunday morning. I was brushing my hair, wearing a yellow robe that still smelled faintly of the lavender I planted by the window, when I looked in the mirror and truly saw myself. Not the broken version. Not the crying bride. Not the punchline to someone else's joke. But me. Older, yes. But wiser. I saw a woman who had survived disappointment, public humiliation, abandonment, and still made her bed every morning. She was still standing. Still brushing her hair. Still living. And I smiled at her like I hadn't in months. That evening, I sat down with a clean sheet of paper and wrote, "Dear future me. I hope you remember this pain, not to stay in it, but to know how far you've come. I hope you love yourself so fiercely no one dares offer you less than you deserve. I hope you trust slowly but completely, and never again put your healing in someone else's hands. And I hope you wear white again, not for someone else, but for yourself. Love. The you who finally chose herself." I folded the letter and tucked it away. And I wept, not because I was broken, but because I was beginning to rebuild. Spring came. And with it, the ache to create something beautiful from what had died. So I dug up the patch of dry, ignored earth in my backyard and started a garden. Each flower had meaning. Lilies for loss. Daisies for innocence. Roses for love that once was, and might be again. Every shovel of dirt felt like therapy. Every sprout felt like a breath of hope. And when the first bloom appeared, I didn't think of Thomas. I thought of my mother, and the strength she poured into me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. 1 year later, I went back to the church. I wore a navy dress. No veil. No flowers. Just me, walking into that same chapel where my heart had once shattered. It was empty, sunlight pouring through stained glass. Dust danced in the air like spirits remembering. I sat in the same pew where I had waited in panic. I whispered, "You don't own this place anymore, Thomas." Then I stood, walked to the altar, and said out loud, "I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I deserve peace." My hand stopped trembling. I walked out lighter. Like something had finally been buried. I was at a local poetry night. A friend dragged me there, and I went just to get out of the house. A young woman read a poem about heartbreak. It was bitter, sharp, raw. Everyone clapped politely. Then she said something that made me laugh out loud. "And if he ever returns, I hope I'm too busy living to notice." The room turned to me. I clapped the loudest. Because that laugh wasn't fake. It came from a place of knowing, of surviving, of finally not being ashamed to have been left and still choosing to bloom. I used to think being loving meant sacrificing. That being patient meant waiting endlessly. That being chosen meant being worthy. Now I know better. Now I know love without respect is starvation. Now I know waiting for someone who runs is not loyalty, it's self-abandonment. Now I know I am enough, not because someone else says so, but because I say so. And it took being left in the most humiliating way for me to find the only thing that never walked out. Me. I threw a party. I wore white. Not a dress, a soft white jumpsuit my friend helped me pick out. I invited women I loved, the ones who sat with me in the dark, who didn't flinch when I cried, who reminded me I was still worth showing up for. We had flowers. Cake. Laughter. I gave a speech. "I'm not celebrating a marriage," I said. "I'm celebrating survival. I'm celebrating the end of waiting for someone to choose me. Because I already did." We toasted. We danced. I didn't need a groom. I had something better. Myself. Dear you. If he left you in the worst way possible, at the altar, in the hospital, at your lowest, please hear this. You are not discardable. You are not hard to love. You are not too much. You were brave enough to love in a world full of cowards. And one man's absence does not shrink your worth, it magnifies it. Grieve. Shatter. But don't stay shattered. Let your pain make you real, not ruined. Wear your heartbreak like armor. Tell your story. Cry, scream, plant flowers. But one day, when you're ready, and that day will come, stand in the mirror, look yourself in the eye, and say, "I didn't need him to become whole." Because you didn't. And you never will. With love. A grandma who waited too long. Until she didn't anymore. Thanks for listening. Like this video and subscribe for more inspirational stories.